What if everything you've been told about manifestation is a distraction? Sit with that for a moment. Let it echo. Let it unsettle a little, because perhaps it's not the lack of effort that has kept your desires at bay. Perhaps it's the very effort itself. The tension behind the prayer, the urgency behind the meditation, the silent despair hiding inside your visualization. So much energy spent doing, hoping it will bring what your heart longs to receive. But what if this devotion to spiritual effort has quietly become resistance? There's a paradox buried in plain sight. The more you chase after the life you want, the more you affirm its absence. The more you try to bend the universe through rituals and routines, the more you vibrate from a place that whispers, "It's not here yet." And in the quantum field, where frequency is everything, what you emit matters more than what you say. As Dr. Joe Dispenza puts it, the quantum field responds not to what we want, it responds to who we are being. Neville Goddard knew this. He taught that reality doesn't arise from action, but from consciousness. Not from force, but from alignment. Not from asking, but from assuming. His metaphor is hauntingly simple. Sleeping in the assumption. You don't beg for the life you desire. You embody it. Silently, deeply, inwardly, as if it were already your truth. As if it were already the air you breathe. You don't create reality by fighting for it. You create it by surrendering into the version of you who no longer needs to manifest anything. Because that version, the one who already is, already has, already knows, doesn't chase, doesn't strive, doesn't force. That version simply is. And from that place, manifestation stops being something you do. It becomes something you are. So here's the central premise. The effortless manifestation secret doesn't lie in adding more practices to your day. It lies in subtracting, in stopping the habitual tension of trying, in dissolving the inner grip of lack. Let's go deeper. Let's unravel the invisible locks, keeping your abundance waiting at the door. Because maybe, just maybe, it's not waiting for you to do more. It's waiting for you to be less of what you're not. There's a quiet desperation that often hides beneath spiritual effort, a tension that hums softly beneath the chanting, the journaling, the daily visualizations. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it's there, and it has a frequency, one that the field can feel. You see, most people don't manifest from a place of faith. They manifest from fear, disguised as devotion. They pray, not because they trust, but because they're terrified that if they stop, the universe will forget them. They meditate, not to enter presence, but to escape a life that feels unbearably incomplete. They visualize with clenched teeth and fluttering hope, believing that if they just do it right, maybe this time, something will shift. But it's not the ritual that's the problem. It's the frequency from which it comes. Strong desire, when tethered to fear, creates contradiction in the field. You're saying yes with your words, but no with your energy. You're reaching out with hope, but the hands that reach are trembling. The vibration of urgency is the vibration of lack, and the quantum responds to the deeper signal, not the surface performance. There was once a woman who spent hours every morning lighting candles, reciting affirmations, cleansing her energy. She was disciplined, sincere, spiritually devoted, and yet nothing moved. No abundance came, no healing arrived. Day after day, she fed her altar with offerings, yet starved her body with anxiety, until one morning, she sat down not to ask, but simply to feel. And in the stillness, she saw it. All her rituals had been hiding a truth she couldn't bear to face. She didn't believe it was possible. She wasn't vibrating faith. She was vibrating fear. That's the hidden block. When the act of manifesting becomes a performance of desperation, the field hears the performance, not the intention. It echoes back the frequency of your emotional baseline, not the beauty of your vision board. And so, the more you do, the further you drift. The more you repeat the affirmations, the more hollow they begin to sound, because they're spoken not from embodiment, but from a silent panic. A panic that says, what if nothing changes? A panic that says, I can't be here. I need to be there. But here's the hard truth. and the liberating one. If you can't find peace where you are, you won't hold it when you arrive. If your practices are driven by the terror of being stuck, they will only reinforce the sensation of being stuck. Because energy doesn't lie. The field doesn't respond to the surface. It responds to the signal beneath. There's a silent exhaustion that begins to grow when we treat manifestation like a job, like something to manage, complete, and check off before the day ends. As if the universe is a manager with a clipboard, waiting to see if you've done enough inner work to deserve what you're asking for. But the truth is, manifestation is not a task. It's not a sequence. It's not something you do. It's something you become. The conscious mind, brilliant as it is, can't bend reality by itself. It tries to, of course, through effort, repetition, sheer willpower. But reality doesn't shift from the surface of thought. It shifts from the deeper waters of identity. The realm of the subconscious, where your beliefs live not as theories, but as unquestioned truths, is where manifestation truly begins. This is why people often do everything right and still see no change. They say the words, they set the goals, they envision the future, but all from a mind that sees the future as separate, all from a nervous system that hasn't yet felt safe in the possibility of more. Because what the brain filters in, what it allows into conscious perception, depends not on what we want, but on what it accepts as real. The reticular activating system, a tiny network in the brainstem, acts as a gatekeeper. It doesn't show you what's possible. It shows you what matches your internal story. That's why neuroplasticity is so powerful, because when we shift our felt experience of now, not our wish for later, we begin to rewire what the brain believes to be true. And the world you see begins to adjust. Gregg Braden speaks of the heart not just as a metaphor, but as a literal interface, a magnetic field stronger than the brain's, capable of sending coherent information to the quantum field. When your heart feels something as real, not future, not maybe, but now, the field listens, because it recognizes coherence. It recognizes emotional integrity. So no, manifestation isn't a list. It's not about being good enough, doing enough, trying hard enough. It's not about earning. It's about aligning. And alignment doesn't require more action. It requires deeper embodiment. You don't need to push. You need to allow. You don't need to convince the universe. You need to convince your own biology that it's already here. And when your inner world stops arguing with your vision, the outer world stops resisting it. There's a strange tension in the human heart. The more something matters to us, the more we grasp for it. And the more we grasp, the more it slips through our fingers. Like water clenched in a fist, the energy of desire, when laced with effort and control, becomes resistance. It's the paradox at the core of quantum reality. The harder you try to observe and direct the outcome, the more the outcome destabilizes and moves away. In quantum mechanics, there's a phenomenon known as the observer effect. The act of observing a particle changes its behavior, but it's not just the act of seeing. It's the intention, the energy behind the observation. When we observe with curiosity, possibilities remain fluid. But when we observe with tension, with need, with a desperate hope for control, the field contracts. Possibilities narrow. The infinite becomes conditional. This is where manifestation falters for so many. The desire is sincere, but the effort to make it happen becomes a frequency of force. And in that frequency, what you're really broadcasting is, I don't trust it will come on its own. And so, unknowingly, you push against the very flow you want to enter. Neville Goddard understood this deeply. His invitation was not to work harder, but to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. But there's a quiet wisdom in that phrase that many miss. If you are still desiring it, then you have not yet become it. If you are still chasing it, then you are still separate from it. Effortful spirituality, the kind that grits its teeth and hopes through clenched jaw and pounding chest, often reinforces the very distance it seeks to close. Because when you strive, you affirm that you are not there yet. When you perform, you unconsciously announce that you still feel unworthy. Trying too hard, then, isn't noble. It's disruptive. The quantum field isn't a reward system. It's a mirror. And if you send the signal of striving, it reflects a world where striving is always needed. But when you release the grip, when you stop trying to make it happen and begin to feel it as already done, you shift timelines. You move from force into flow. So the invitation is subtle but radical. Allow. Let the wanting soften. Let the effort dissolve. Let the signal you send be one of calm certainty, not frantic hope. Because in the stillness of true alignment, manifestation becomes less of a task and more of a natural consequence. There comes a point in the spiritual journey when even the most sacred rituals lose their meaning, not because they are wrong or empty, but because they begin to replace presence with performance. What once opened your heart to the infinite now becomes a routine, a checkbox, a superstition, and without noticing, you begin to live for the ritual instead of living from the reality the ritual was meant to evoke. It's a quiet trap, easy to miss. You wake up, light the incense, play the meditation track, close your eyes, and you feel a sense of spiritual accomplishment. But then, as the day unfolds, your actions betray the same patterns: insecurity, doubt, fear, self-sabotage. You long for love, but question every text. You affirm abundance, but shrink when the bill arrives. You chant peace, but bristle at every delay. The ritual was pure. The routine was well-intentioned, but the vibration remained divided. Because the field doesn't listen to what you say at dawn. It listens to who you are when you're not trying, when you're in traffic, when no one's watching, when you're alone with your thoughts. It reads your coherence, not your calendar. It responds to your embodied frequency, not your spiritual identity. There's nothing wrong with techniques, meditation, prayer, visualization. They're tools, but they're not substitutes for transformation. If they become ways to escape your emotional baseline rather than integrate it, they stop serving you. They start delaying you. Because the goal was never to do the practice perfectly. The goal was to become the person who no longer needs to pretend. Imagine someone who sits in stillness every morning, visualizing a relationship filled with love and safety. But throughout the day, they scan for signs of abandonment. They test their partner. They brace for rejection. The ritual was sincere, but the nervous system never shifted. And so the signal sent to the field is still one of fear. That's the dissonance. And coherence cannot arise in dissonance. So the invitation is this: observe not your rituals, but your daily identity. Not what you do when you feel spiritual, but how you move when life feels ordinary. That is the true offering. That is the true ritual. Your embodied state, hour by hour, thought by thought, action by action, not separate from your spiritual life, but the fullest expression of it. When the ritual becomes you, the field responds not with reward, but with reflection. Because now there is nothing left to perform. There is only resonance. There's something deeply humbling and quietly revolutionary about realizing that life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you are. Not in the moral sense, not as punishment or reward, but as resonance. The external world is not separate from you. It is a living mirror, a reflection of your inner state, your subconscious identity, your felt assumptions. This is why desire alone is never enough. You can want abundance, love, health, freedom, and still live in a loop of lack. Not because the universe is testing you, but because your internal mirror keeps reflecting a self that does not yet believe, not truly, not consistently, not deeply enough to shift the signal. When you say, "I want," the mirror replies, "Yes," and you do not yet have. When you say, "I need," the mirror replies, "Yes," and you are still waiting. It's not personal, it's vibrational. Reality doesn't respond to intention. It responds to identity, not to the affirmations you whisper, but to the assumptions you carry when no one is listening. So the path forward is not to intensify the wanting, but to soften into the being, to begin living in the micro movements of someone who already knows the desire is fulfilled, not pretending, not faking, but allowing the body, the breath, the posture, the tone of voice, the choices, to gently reflect the reality you've claimed in silence. When your actions begin to mirror the state you've chosen, the field begins to echo back the life you've already embodied. It doesn't mean forcing smiles or acting out of denial. It means stepping into the coherence of the version of you who no longer reaches because they have already received, who no longer asks because they've become the answer. Start small, not with grand gestures, but with subtle shifts. Walk slower, breathe deeper, speak from stillness, not from fear. Move as if the life you seek is already woven into your cells. Let your presence announce your abundance, not your words, not your plans, but your presence. That is where the mirror finds alignment. Because when you change the image in the mirror, the reflection doesn't argue. It simply changes too. There is a rhythm within you that is older than thought, a frequency of calm, steady presence, a knowing. But in today's world, that rhythm is constantly hijacked by something much louder. The restless pulse of dopamine, not joy, not peace, just the rush of anticipation, the thrill of maybe this is it. And when it doesn't come, the crash, the emptiness, the cycle starts again. Dopamine is not the problem. It's a natural part of your brain's chemistry. It motivates, it energizes, it creates movement toward what matters. But in a nervous system trained by constant craving, the next sign, the next synchronicity, the next message from the universe, dopamine becomes distortion. You're no longer manifesting from alignment. You're manifesting from addiction, and it's subtle. You check your phone, hoping for a message. You open a post, hoping it's a sign. You interpret numbers, symbols, delays, all with that quiet ache beneath. Is it happening yet? But each time you reach with expectation, you're reinforcing the gap. You're tuning your body to a frequency of not yet. The signal sent is not faith, it's fluctuation. The more you depend on outer signs to reassure you, the more unstable your inner world becomes. And when your inner world is unstable, your frequency is inconsistent. The quantum field, always listening, receives the mixed signal. One moment you're aligned, the next you're doubting. One moment you're sure, the next you're searching. And nothing stable can emerge from that vibration. It's not punishment, it's just coherence. The field echoes what you are, not what you chase. So the path is not to eliminate dopamine, but to understand its place, to quiet the cycle, to stabilize, to sit in the stillness of no evidence, and remain in trust, to let the nervous system relearn the language of peace without proof, to cultivate the ability to stay grounded even when nothing seems to be happening, because that's when everything actually is. When your frequency stops oscillating, when your signal becomes consistent, calm, confident, present, manifestation begins to accelerate, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped interrupting it. There is power in the quiet. There is manifestation in the mundane, and there is a frequency that only emerges when the craving stops. Not the craving for things, but the craving for signs. When you no longer need the universe to reassure you, it does, effortlessly. There is a moment in the journey when you stop looking outward, when you no longer scan the horizon for signs or miracles or confirmation, not because you've given up, but because you've remembered who you are. You are not a beggar at the gates of the universe. You are the gate itself, the portal, the passage through which the invisible becomes form. Neville Goddard spoke of imagination not as fantasy, but as the creative substance of reality itself. Imagination creates reality, he said, and he meant it literally, not as metaphor, not as inspiration, but as quantum law. Because the moment you embody an inner state as if it were already real, you change your vibrational signature, and the field rearranges around that signal. But the key is embodiment, not wishing, not pretending, not hoping from a distance. It's entering the vibration so deeply that the future dissolves. There is no someday, there is only now. And in that now, the version of you who already has what you desire becomes the only version you're aligned with, the only one you broadcast. You are not here to receive reality like a passive participant. You are here to translate it, to generate it, to allow it to pass through the lens of your coherence. When you vibrate from completion, not from need, not from desire, but from presence, the external begins to match the internal, not as reward, as resonance. But this requires a different kind of attention, a deeper self-inquiry. Where in your life are you still vibrating almost? Where in your thoughts do you still whisper, not yet? Where in your choices are you still holding the future as something separate from you? Because those are the places where the portal closes. Not because you're wrong or broken, but because the signal becomes unstable. And manifestation needs stability, not perfection, not certainty, but coherence. The steady hum of a being who knows. So when you stop seeking and start embodying, the field responds. When you stop performing and start existing in the energy of fulfillment, life organizes itself around you, not because you asked, but because you became, not because you waited, but because you remembered. You were never meant to receive the miracle. You were always meant to be it. There's something profound that happens when you stop trying to manifest and begin to remember that you already are the vibration of everything you seek, not as a philosophy, not as a clever idea, but as a lived reality. In this stillness, in this space where effort dissolves, the body begins to soften, the breath deepens, and the nervous system finally rests. Bruce Lipton once said, "Your genes respond to your perception of reality, not reality itself. What you perceive, what you truly, deeply believe to be real, becomes the instruction set for your biology, and that biology, in turn, becomes the transmission point for the quantum field, not as a metaphor, as frequency, as data, as code." This is epigenetics in its most sacred expression, not just a theory of health, but a gateway to transformation. When you shift the way you feel the present moment, not escape it, not fix it, but inhabit it with grace, you begin to emit a new signal. And that signal is not one of striving, it is one of surrender, one of coherence, one of yes. There's no more need to chase the future, no more waiting for the signs to tell you it's safe to believe. When you stabilize your internal state, even when nothing seems to change externally, the universe begins to move, quietly, elegantly. Not because you demanded it, but because you became undistracted, because you stopped leaking your power into doubt. Gregg Braden once said, "Feel the prayer, don't say the prayer." It's not the words that shift reality. It's the feeling, the embodiment, the vibrational certainty, not shouted, not begged, simply lived. So if something in this message stirred you, not your intellect, but your essence, let that ripple, let it reach someone else. Not for numbers, not for likes, but to keep this field coherent, to keep the signal strong, one awake heart at a time, because every time you return to who you truly are, the world becomes a little more whole.